In tonight's news edition, His Majesty the King and Saudi Arabia's foreign minister discussed ties, Middle East peace efforts, and the repercussions of the Syrian crisis. Stone-throwing protests break out in the occupied city of Hebron, where Israeli troops kill 3 Palestinians. And the Syrian government says it will attend the Geneva talks but will not surrender power. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty the King and Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Saud Al Faisal discussed ways of enhancing Saudi-Jordanian ties in various fields to serve the common interest of the two countries and pan-Arab and Muslim causes. His Majesty and the Saudi minister also talked about current developments in the Middle East, including efforts to bring about peace in the region based on the two-state solution and the Arab Peace Initiative. The meeting also dealt with the Syrian crisis and its repercussions. King Abdullah emphasized the importance of finding a comprehensive political solution to the crisis to put an end to the suffering of the Syrian people. Minister of Foreign and Expatriate Affairs Nasser Joudeh said Jordan's complementary partnership with the Six-Nation Gulf Cooperation Council was built on a solid basis. He said the kingdom and the GCC nations had commonly sought to achieve developmental goals and institutionalize cooperation in the form of fruitful plans that affected the lives of Jordanians. Joudeh was addressing a joint ministerial meeting of the GCC states, Jordan and Morocco, held in Kuwait. He said the advanced level of fruitful integration had opened new scopes in relations between the 8 countries as an embodiment of the deep historic cultural bond among them. The minister thanked GCC leaders for their support of Jordan, especially their approval of a $5 billion grant that helped to carry out projects that would directly affect the life of Jordanians. He said the GCC-funded projects were proceeding through close coordination and that specialized teams would soon put them into implementation in various economic sectors.
The process of cooperation between the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan and the Gulf Cooperation Council state is taking an institutional shape at this stage. This relationship has been shaped through agreements made in previous meetings. We hope to work closely together to pursue and consolidate cooperation to arrive at the aspired goal in this distinguished partnership and integration between Jordan and the GCC countries.
Kuwait's Deputy Premier and Foreign Minister Sheikh Sabah Al-Khalid Al-Sabah spoke about advances made in the joint cooperation between the GCC and Jordan and Morocco on the road to forging a strategic partnership among them. He told the ministers the GCC backed Jordan and Morocco at all levels. The Council of Ministers decided to proceed with firm legal action in a crackdown against illegal wells used for irrigation after the expiry of a deadline for their closure. The cabinet, meeting in a session chaired by Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour, agreed that the Ministry of Water and Irrigation should take a series of measures against the illegal wells. Under the measures, owners of illegal wells will not be offered any agriculture or other governmental loans. Electricity will not be linked to any well except after clearance from the ministry, and power will be disconnected from any illegal wells. Lawmakers unanimously decided to refer the crisis facing local daily newspapers to the Lower House's National Guidance and Media Committee. The Lower House, meeting in a second chaired by Speaker Atif Tarawne and attended by Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour and cabinet ministers, asked the committee to debate the issue and submit solutions to the House. Lawmakers demanded that the crisis be given utmost urgency in order to protect the national press and its institutions. The debate was asked in a memo by MPs from the Islamic Centrist Party, who warned of the dangers of the press crisis and what they called the bleak future awaiting our national press. They said drastic solutions had to be found to address the imbalances the local press faces and to provide the necessary support for the print media. Employees of 2 major newspapers have staged strikes to call for a raise in wages and better work conditions, among other demands. Her Majesty Queen Rania visited the Jordan University of Science and Technology just in Irbid and inaugurated the new lecture hall complex. Also during her visit, the Queen met with women academics from different faculties and administrative positions. Her Majesty unveiled the plaque and was briefed by the university's president, Abdullah Malkawi, about the new complex established by engineers working at the university. Queen Rania stopped by the online computer lab equipped with technological infrastructure capable of hosting 180 students at a time. Her Majesty spoke to several faculty deans as well as to some students who had gathered to greet her. At the university library, Queen Rania was briefed on the different services provided to students, and at the library, Her Majesty met with some students and listened to their feedback about the self-service borrowing system, which allows students to borrow and return books online. During this meeting, Queen Rania expressed her pride in the university. The Israeli army withdrew from southern Hebron in the early hours after a raid left 3 Palestinians dead. Residents and family members rushed to the local clinic as the dead men were brought in. This report has more.
Tension ran high in the southern West Bank after the fatal shooting of 3 Palestinians by Israeli soldiers that touched off stone-throwing protests. Dozens of Palestinian youths clashed with Israeli troops in Hebron after the killings last night. They also threw stones and burned tires while Israeli troops fired rubber bullets and tear gas. According to Israeli military officials, the 3 Palestinians were part of an Al-Qaeda-linked network in the occupied West Bank. But the Palestinian Authority denied they had any relation to Al-Qaeda and accused Israel of setting out to kill the men. An official from Israel's Shin Bet security agency said it had learned from a number of earlier arrests that the network was planning attacks in the coming days against Israeli targets. The military said 2 of the men were killed when they opened fire on officers trying to arrest them. Thousands of mourners marched through the streets of Hebron and the nearby village of Yatta, attending funerals of the 3 men.
يعني اللي صار هي مجزرة، هي عملية قتل متعمد، هي جريمة نكراء من الجرائم اللي يعني مش مستهجن عن المحتل، اللي قاعدة تضاف يوميا ضد شعبنا. اللي صار هي جريمة يندى لها الجبين الإنساني.
Al-Qaeda-inspired groups have a small presence in the Hamas-ruled Gaza Strip, but are less common in the occupied West Bank. The latest killings came after a spate of deadly violence in the past months, which also saw a rise in attacks by Jewish settlers against local Palestinians. Hiba Al-Artoum for the News at 10.
The foreign ministers of Turkey and Iran called for a ceasefire in Syria before peace talks in Geneva scheduled for January the 22nd. The Syrian government has said it will attend the talks but will not bow to Western demands for President Bashar al-Assad to step aside. It said the president and government had no intention of seceding power at the meeting.
We will go to Geneva, not to surrender power as we always repeat, but to participate with others in authority. But as you know, when governments are being formed in the world, they are formed according to the weights of parliamentarian blocks in the parliament. We will participate with the others in forming a national unity government based on our respective weight in parliament.
At least 20 people were killed and 35 wounded in bombings and shootings across Iraq. In one of the attacks, 4 suicide bombers targeted a police station in Ramadi, west of Baghdad, killing 4 policemen and wounding 15. Another attack at a police station just north of Ramadi killed 4 officers and wounded 7. A roadside bomb targeted an Iraqi army patrol in the western city of Qa'im on the volatile Iraqi-Syrian border, killed 1 soldier and wounded another. Police also found evidence of execution-style killings. They retrieved the bodies of 8 men, blindfolded and handcuffed, in the mainly Sunni area of Arab Jbur, south of Baghdad. Northwest of the capital, 5 corpses were found in the mainly Shiite district of Shu'aila. In the mainly Shiite district of Hurriya, northwest of Baghdad, gunmen killed a Sunni Muslim family of 5. In Egypt, 2 pro-democracy campaigners known for their role in the popular uprising that ousted Hosni Mubarak are to be arrested for inciting protests. The prosecutors ordered the arrest of Ahmed Maher, head of the April 6 youth movement, and Ala Abdel Fattah. The arrest was issued a day after they joined demonstrations outside Parliament in defiance of a law passed by the army-backed government on Sunday to curb protests. Scuffles broke out between protesters and security forces in the northern port city of Alexandria during a demonstration against the new law and against the arrest of 24 activists yesterday. Rocks were thrown and security forces used tear gas to try and disperse the crowd. The activists are to be detained for 4 days pending investigation of allegations of thuggery, attacking public employees, stealing wireless devices, and protesting without permission from the Interior Ministry. 3 Libyan soldiers were shot dead when the army clashed with Islamist militants in the eastern city of Benghazi. Gun battles erupted again in 3 parts of the port city in the early hours when members of Ansar al-Sharia threw a grenade at a special forces patrol. Earlier, fighting broke out between special forces and members of Ansar al-Sharia in Benghazi, killing at least 9 people before the militants retreated from their main base. The group was blamed for an attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi in September 2012, when the U.S. ambassador and 3 other Americans were killed. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Jawad Zarif told Parliament that a deal with 6 world powers agreed at talks in Geneva would ultimately normalize Tehran's nuclear program. Addressing deputies at an open session of Parliament in the Iranian capital, Zarif said the agreement was a good deal for Iran. Zarif also detailed how the agreement reached last Sunday between Iran, the United States, China, Russia, France, Britain, and Germany would affect the country's nuclear activity. President Hassan Rouhani said after the deal was signed that Iran will not halt uranium enrichment. He told Iranian television that Tehran had a right to continue its program. The president said he was optimistic that a final agreement will be reached with the P5+1 power. Rouhani said the lifting of the sanctions will make a positive difference to the Iranian economy as he sought to silence his critics over the nuclear agreement.
In this agreement, it is noted that there will be no further sanctions. This by itself means limiting the sanctions. It means taming the sanctions. Many are trying to seclude Iran. But who is secluded today? It's our enemies who are secluded. Iran is more active in the international scene than ever.
Thailand's Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra was grilled by lawmakers for a second day ahead of a confidence vote. Thousands of anti-government protesters swarmed around government buildings calling for the Prime Minister to quit. Demonstrators massed outside 4 government ministries, a major state office complex, and 24 provincial halls in a widening effort to cripple the administration and oust Shinawatra. By evening, more than 13,000 protesters surrounded the country's top crime-fighting agency and an adjacent government complex. They already occupy the finance ministry and have forced the evacuation of 4 other ministries in 2 days. The protests threatened to destabilize Thailand at a delicate time, just as its economy, Southeast Asia's second biggest, is losing momentum. Responding to the crisis, Thailand's central bank unexpectedly cut interest rates by a quarter point. It seems the fascination with the late Queen of Hearts still lingers on. One of Princess Diana's most romantic and ornate of gowns is going under the hammer at London's Carey Taylor auction house. The so-called fairy tale dress was designed by one of Diana's favorite designers, the Emmanuels, in 1986. The size 10 dress is expected to fetch between $81,000 and $130,000. The dress is white organza and satin and has shimmer gold panels, jewel-like rhinestones, and pearl adornments. It was a favorite of Diana's, and she wore it several times, including to the Royal Opera House and to the premiere of the James Bond film, The Living Daylights. The dress is expected to go to a private collector or end up in a museum. Over to sports and some NBA action. The Washington Wizards beat the Los Angeles Lakers 116-111 at the Verizon Center in Washington, D.C. John Wall, the Wizards' 2010 draft recruit, hasn't disappointed his fans, racking up 31 points, 9 assists, and 6 rebounds. The Lakers are still without Kobe Bryant and Steve Nash, meaning other players will have to step up their game. Jordan Farmar did his best by giving his team 22 points and 8 assists, but it wasn't enough for the West Coast Giants. And finally, a quick look at the weather. Unstable conditions will continue to affect the country tonight and tomorrow. Therefore, it will be cloudy with a chance for thundery showers. Winds will be northeasterly to northwesterly, blowing dust in the desert regions. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect cloudy skies with a slight chance for scattered rains. Winds will be northerly moderate and seas slightly choppy. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty the King and Saudi Arabia's foreign minister discussed ties, Middle East peace efforts, and the repercussions of the Syrian crisis. Stone-throwing protests break out in the occupied city of Hebron, where Israeli troops killed 3 Palestinians. And the Syrian government says it will attend the Geneva talks but will not surrender power. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.